has chores she has to do, absolutely. But it's a list of chores, and as long as all of them get done every week, she gets some money thrown her way. If they don't, there's a punishment. But it doesn't matter what day she does what chore. It's people do better with options. And
right.
Having felt like I didn't have any, most of my childhood or whatever, I'm sure. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say what way is healthier. I guess it's probably a middle ground type of thing, because I know I go way on the other side of the spectrum as my parents. Same. They had way too much control, and I'm like, do whatever you want, kid. As long as you're not burning the house down, you're good.
Right. Yeah, it's like if you have too much structure, when you're finally able to make the decisions for yourself, you're just like, fuck structure. Like I'm just gonna just be in total chaos and make it work, because I've had it up to here with everything so regimented. So, it does seem like, having that balance is a good thing, and giving your children options to decide when they're going to do things, making, they know that it has to happen, but not like micromanaging them to the nth degree, to where they have like no breathing room, and that they're really not learning how to think for themselves and learning how to think critically. Like, okay, well, if I do this today, then that means I can get that out of the way, and I can go do this tomorrow. And then the following day I can do two things to make up for that. And that way, what needs to happen happens, but then I also get what I want. You're not kind of inundated with this structure that suffocates you.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do. Not only do I hope, but I actually see the evidence of the sense of personal power and personal responsibility that my daughter has that I didn't. Man, I'll tell you what, it's.
She definitely seems to be a very independent free thinker, just from where I met her, 2 years ago, she's much younger then. She was already, I could already get that sense from her that she, she knew what was going on with the world and how it worked much more than, a lot of kids that are just so coddled and that really aren't allowed to think for themselves, and that are really just kind of told what to do and what to think, and really not allowed to think for themselves and to make decisions. And, when they get out in the real world, they just really don't even know what to do. They're dumbfounded, so they'll just stay in school forever and ever and just plug into academia and get 12 degrees. And, it's like, oh, well, yeah, there's nothing else that you can do. Now it's time to get out in the real world. And they're like, what? Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm so glad that I was, brought up in that manner, to where, kind of how you probably were in a lot of ways as you got older, younger teens, and later it's, I kind of raised myself, and it was hard, and it could be, a little lonely sometimes, but I learned so much from it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting to be raising a daughter, a child of any gender or whatever, but at the age, she, like I said, she's 13, and so that that's it's interesting, because that's what we're talking about kind of today, is about that age range,
right?
And there's the one thing that I remember wanting from my parents at that point in my life was just to be left alone. I don't care if I come and watch a movie with the family. I don't even give a fuck if I eat dinner. Just let me sit in my room and fucking do my own thing. And once again, not necessarily the healthiest, but that's where you're at that age. You're trying to figure yourself out, and you're trying to figure yourself out without your parents. See, the nutty thing is the interplay there, because as the parent, you lose yourself to the role of being a parent. You have to relearn who you are. You've got to re-find yourself. As a child, they're going through the exact same thing at about the exact same time.
Right. That's crazy, isn't it?
Oh, it's nutty. Well, and there is a psychological kind of theory about that as your child goes through different phases of their life, that you start revisiting that phase in your subconscious mind, that you start kind of reliving things. So it's you know, like right now, all of a sudden I'm back into like the music I was listening to when I was 13. I'm listening to punk rock and whatever and going, oh, okay.
I can so relate, dude. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, and it's nuts. And, you know, it is cool to be able to step out and look at that objectively and go, oh, wow, you know, this is, the interplay is really interesting. You know, I had a voodoo possession where my Loa Met test came up into me, and my assistant Doug was asking him questions and said, "What's the true self?" And he says, there is no true self. You only know yourself through others, and so it's like the interplay of relationships. The conversation is like, why did the all split itself into all these different, you know, psyches and whatever, in order to have difference, and so that difference can kind of communicate and allow a knowledge of, I guess, the center. It's I don't know, kind of a mystical type of thing, but yeah. But anyways, yeah. So my mom remarries, and we move into this pretty nice home, actually, like 2-story home. Like I think it's like an 1.5 acre property just out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And I mean, we had like a street with neighbors like on this one street, but to get to that street, you're driving through a lot of empty desert. And it was actually perfect. It was, you know, just go wander out in the desert, be by myself all day long, if, you know, during the summer at least, or when I wasn't in school. And my relationship with my mom started getting pretty strained at that point. You know, I'm 10, 11, 12 years old. I'm starting to do that pushing away. You know, I want to be left alone, and
like not coming home when you're supposed to, and making hurry and that kind of thing. Or
it wasn't so much not coming home when I was supposed to, because so once my parents split, before they split, there was just nothing but rules. I mean, you know, your room had to be spotless, and you know, this is the time that we do dinner, this is the time that you do this, and everything was really, really super structured, overly structured. After my parents split, living with my mom, that completely disappeared. Like, there was no curfew, there was no time for dinner. If you get home, maybe she's going to make something, maybe not, you know, and so you still, you know, I'll start looking through the fridge, and what's the frustrating part of it is that if she did have something in mind, you know, you were supposed to pick up on that. Like, right. Little son of a bitch, you're making a sandwich. I was about to make dinner. Well, how was I supposed to know that, Mom? But, but anyways, like, those are, you know, I guess, first world, middle class problems, you know, that, you know, just come home, make my own food and whatever. I had food to eat. I had a nice home to live in and whatever. So, but the relationship was strained. And I'll tell you what, I always had a hard time, like, not always, until recently, until the last 10 years of my life or so. I've had a really, really hard time actually, like, bonding with people and connecting with people. Like, I have one memory in my entire memory bank of, like, of sitting on my adopted mom's lap and her, like, cuddling me and rocking me. And at that point I was like 14 years old or something, like way too big for that. And so I was going through a complete fucking breakdown. And that's the one time that I had that kind of, like, intimate connection with a parent figure.
Right. That's so important too, you know, when you're younger. So to miss out on that, I mean, that's really going to mess with you emotionally, you know, quite a bit.
I imagine. Yeah. I mean, I've only got myself to look at. So, I mean, I imagine that's that had to, I'll tell you what, it definitely made relationships more difficult to negotiate as an adult, because if it wasn't, you know, obviously, as people are exploring their own relationships or whatever, you go through phases of it being all about sex, and that was most of my adulthood. Like, and even to this day, it does take like a conscious push for me to let go and to, you know, when I'm with my girlfriend and I do love her so much, I put my arms around her. I actually have to like tell myself to, you know, breathe out, let go, put the walls down. But I don't think that's unique to me. Honestly, I think that our culture has gotten very, we've gotten very contradictory with a lot of things that only very limited displays of affection and intimacy are allowed. Only in specific contexts. Honest communication is not allowed in our society still. It's interesting. It's nutty. I think we're changing that, like actively. Those of us that are actively out there trying to get people to have conversations. I mean, it is changing the scene for sure. But
Right.
it's nutty to see that, and to once again to take all of these ideas and import them into my parenting style. To like be like, oh, well, this is what my parents did. This is what I experienced. So like my daughter, all through when she was a baby and up until she started getting so old that she's like, all right, Dad, you're being weird now. But I mean, I hold her, walk around with her all the time. She like lived on my left arm through most of her like childhood. I just carry her around everywhere with me, and just the complete opposite as far as letting her know how I feel about her and that she's important to me and etc. So. But that made the experience with my stepfather, I think, even more like meaningful. Is that I didn't necessarily have that with either of my parents. I didn't have that loving connection, and so that he wanted to take an interest at all, go to basketball games and stuff, I thought was awesome. Went and saw a horror movie, Relic. Remember that came out when I was in 6th grade. I thought it was the most badass thing. I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies my entire like childhood, and then he's all, "Hey, let's go sneak away and do this."
Yeah, what a cool dude, right?
yeah, totally. Totally. He was interestingly, he was in when he was at home. He was, almost like aloof, or he would sit and watch a game or MASH, or he would watch a lot of TV and just like zone out.
He was living in his own imaginary world or whatever as well to escape or something.
Yeah. He served in the army over in Korea, the Korean War, and he was a chaplain's assistant, and so he didn't actually engage in battle himself, but was trained for it and was taking he was helping the soldiers with their mental health.
Yeah, he probably still saw like a tremendous amount of death, and had to be there for that. And
I'm sure. And he didn't talk about it. He did not talk about it. And I was the kind of kid I've always asked. I always asked the crazy shit. Everyone's like, stop that. But I didn't straight up ask him if he'd like seen people die or anything. But I was like, hey, so the army, what was that like for you? And blah, blah. And he would give me generic answers and kind of brush it off. But yeah, so at that point I started, like I said, my mom's relationship and my mom's relationship with me was getting really, really strained. And her relationship with him was getting really strained. And so I think, I don't know, without that counterbalance of having a relationship that she's, being fulfilled by, that, I don't know. I wouldn't say that she maybe she did strike out at the kids or whatever. I don't know. It seems like her relationship started doing really not that great. And then our relationship started doing not that great, getting to the point of like, just, yelling at each other constantly and whatever. And at that point, like I said, I'm starting to like differentiate myself from her. I'm starting to go, 12 years old or so. And I'm going, starting to push back against it,
Right.
That rather than just like being yelled at, I'm like, no, you listen here. And
right.
Now about the same time, because this is all coming to a head, I end up moving out of her house, moving in with my dad. But right before that happens, my stepbrother, he was a couple years older than me. He comes over with some of his cousins.
Oh, so that guy had some kids too then?
Yeah. He had been married like 3 or 4 times previously.
Oh God.
Yeah, he had several children.
Red flag.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it should have been. It should have been. Yeah. So anyways, yeah, his kids, my stepbrothers, were awesome dudes. Really cool influences. I mean, at least I think. Maybe some people would look at them and think they're bad influences, but I love them. One of them comes over with his 2 cousins and 2 brothers, and they go, okay, we're gonna make an Ouija board. And I'm like, well,
you're like, oh shit.
Yeah, and I didn't even know what was happening. Like, what's going on here? What is this thing? It's like, this is how you communicate with spirits, or whatever. And they're like, yeah, you want to find out? Here's a movie. So we watched this movie, Witchboard.
Dude, I saw that when I was a kid too. Oh yeah, fuck yeah, love that.
Yeah. So watch this movie, and they're like, so we're gonna make one of these, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And they say that it has to be made out of actual wood, that you've got to have, it has to be, because wood at one point was alive, and so it has the spirit in it. So you got to make it out of actual wood, and you got to make it yourself rather than like buying it or whatever, imbuing it with your own energy. And so they had some of these like fundamental principles that aren't even, they didn't know that they were principles of any sort, but just kind of like urban mythology, which does contain a lot of little bits and pieces of interesting things. So
right.
Yeah, so we go into the little wood shop that we had there, and we had all kinds of tools and saws and sanders and everything that we need. So we go get all our stuff together and make ourselves an Ouija board, and just take some marker and do all the lettering and everything. Cut a planchet out with a skill saw, and we grew up like being able to do home remodeling and stuff. When you got 7 kids, you don't pay contractors for a lot. You're like, hey, go get all, especially, you got a few of us that were boys, and we just hit it. My sisters too would hit it and just work on, fix up rooms and tear walls out. So we all knew how to make shit. So we make an Ouija board. And now at that point, I still believed enough of the Mormon faith to be scared by this, and having watched the movie for sure. Like, the movie ends with the dude getting like an axe chopping into his head. I'm all, I don't want that.
Yeah, that movie was freaking scary, man. I remember seeing that when I was about 8 or 9 myself, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, oh yeah. So we sit down, and I go, I'm not gonna touch this thing. But I want to be in the room. I want to see it, but I don't want to do it. And they go, okay, well, if you're going to be in the room, you have to somehow be involved. And I go, okay, so I tell you, I'll take notes. And I'll sit there with a notepad and take notes on whatever it says. They're like, all right, cool. So that was my job. Now, there's probably like 6 people there, all gathered around. That I'm looking over to see where it's going to move, and Planchet starts doing a figure 8. And my stepbrother goes, oh, that means it's a powerful spirit. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, 8 is not an 8, it's an infinity. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. He goes, and it's pushing really fast. I'm like, all right, one of you motherfuckers is pushing this with your hands. And it goes, we're basically bantering as this thing is moving in figure 8. And then it goes to no, and then goodbye, like boom, boom. And everyone's like, whoa, what's up? And put the hands back on it. Are there any spirits here? That's kind of the format that we would all use. You put your hands on the planchet and ask if there are any spirits there. And it goes, yes. And it goes, yes. And then S-A, so the letters S-A, and I do that repeatedly, S-A, 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 and then goes to goodbye. And so they put their hands back on. I'm writing all this down. What the fuck? And so my stepbrother goes, well, why? You're here. You want to communicate with us. What do you want? What do you need? So the planchet does figure 8, SA, 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 and then and then spins and points towards me, goes off of the board. So the planche is pointing at me. And everyone's like, all right, dude, like, it wants to talk to you. And I'm all, no, I'm taking notes, remember? And they're like, nah, somebody else is going to take notes. Like, this thing wants to talk to you. We want to talk to it. Put your hands on the goddamn planches. So I did. And we start, it goes from just being, it would always introduce itself, because we did multiple sessions with this spirit, that it would start doing a figure 8 and then do the letters S-A. And so we started calling it SAW. And it told us, it spun this whole story over like multiple days, hours of sitting there playing with this Ouija board. You know, whenever we could get the group of us together, that's what we would do. Like, and we talked to this spirit that was saying it was an 8-year-old boy that had died, like been drowned or something like that. And as we were talking to it, I could start to feel like a presence in the room, like, and not just like a blanket presence, but like a body, a spiritual body somewhere. And it got so, it's almost like in the back of my awareness, as I'm distracted with the board and all of that I'm sensing a full-grown adult male spirit form there standing in the corner. And as at one point I asked him, I'm like, I don't know that this is a kid that we're talking to. I think we're being lied to. I think that it's an adult. And so we confront the spirit about that. It gets all pissed off. I don't remember what it says, but it just keeps going to goodbye. Right as soon as we were like, hey, so are you really an adult, or are you really what's your real story or whatever? It goes to goodbye. So everyone's like, yeah, all right, we're done. This is weird. I start pushing it more and more. I'm telling my stepbrothers, I'm like, no, we've got to like keep talking to it. We got to ask it what the fuck is up. We've got to like solve this mystery. And they're like, no, what we got to do is leave this shit alone. And I'm like, no, let's keep going with it. Let's keep going.
Yeah, you've opened Pandora's box now, buddy. Like, you got to keep going after it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was like a couple days later, they all come back over. And I'm pretty sure this is all over a summer. So we got summer off. This is what you do in fucking southern Utah in the summer, I guess.
Right.
So we a couple days later, we all get together and start doing it. My sisters at that point tapped out. They were done. They were not fucking with this thing anymore. It was getting a little too weird. You know, it was all fun while it was some kid, but now that there's, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's this demon that's lying. That was too much for them. My stepbrother and cousins come over, and we start doing it again. And my my step cousin says, says, you're lying to us. And like, he goes, fuck you, you're lying to us. What's your real name? And he goes, S-A. And we're like, no, really, what's your name? And then it's spelled it out, S-A-T-A-N, Satan. And he goes,
shit.
He goes, bullshit, this isn't Satan. And fucking breaks the board. And so breaks the board, throws it out. I've not seen the kid since. That was the last time I saw him. Now,
wow.
The story is, my stepbrother comes over like a week later, and comes over wearing church clothes. Wearing his just slacks and white shirt. And he didn't go to church. He'd never gone to church. His dad wasn't never religious. He was atheist for being I don't know if it was maybe the experience he had in Korea or just life in general or just being a smart guy or whatever, but he was an atheist. And so he instantly was like, something's up. What's wrong? And he goes, I'm going to a funeral. He goes, for my aunt. And I'm like, what do you mean my aunt? He goes, your cousin's mom. I'm like, what do you mean the cousin's mom? He goes, yeah, she died from a shotgun wound. And I go, what do you mean she died from a shotgun wound? He's like, yeah, shotgun multiple shotgun blasts to the face. And I'm like, multiple shotgun blasts to the face. And he goes, yeah, it's a suicide. And I'm all, what do you mean it's a suicide? He goes, I don't know, because it was a pump action shotgun. Now that means you're shooting, boom, pump, shooting, and multiple. And there was they were living in like a trailer, and it was locked up. None of the neighbors had heard anything. Just a mysterious thing that got shuffled away as just being a suicide. That was really, really weird. And he says, and I don't know if he was just trying to fuck with me at this point, because that's what stepbrothers do sometimes. But he says, yeah, they kept playing with the Ouija board. They made another one, and they said that they actually had seen So they'd made this other Ouija board, according to what he said, that had holes in the corners of it. You put candles in, and so they had these candles there, and the candles kind of create a little glow over it. And so as they're pushing the planchette around, that they saw they said a 4-fingered hand come up at them, like a bony 4-fingered hand that came up, like formed out of the light, and came up and like was kind of grabbing at them, just as the spirit on the boards says, issue some kind of threat, that they're like, because for whatever reason, my cousins or step cousins had it in their head that they were going to like do battle with whatever this is. If this is Satan, they're going to show it who's boss or whatever. And so they start being adversarial. They start calling and being like, hey, you're Satan, fuck you, blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, like within a week, mom's dead. Like mysterious ass.
What the fuck?
Yeah. So my stepbrother links that up for me, and he goes, so they were doing this, and then this happens. I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, oh shit. And so,
this is the guy that kind of initiated the whole thing, right?
Pretty much.
He's fuck, man.
Yeah. And I don't know what must have been going on in his head, but like, dude, I'm all, that's when things started sparking for me. That's like, oh, wait a minute, there is this other realm. It's the exact same, other world that I've heard about in church and in the Bible, and these angels and demons and spirits and shit. It's all real, and there are ways that you can actually contact these motherfuckers. Now, at the same time, like I said, my relationship with my mom gets crazy. And then my dad, he's back in the States for a bit and moves up to Washington State. And my brother moved back with my mom for whatever reason. So I guess, I guess I saw that as like an opening, that I was like, all right, so my brother's not living with him anymore. That means he's got a spot open in his house. So I get hold of my dad, and I'm like, all right, it's gotten way too crazy with mom. And he's like, yeah, I know where you're at. All right. He goes, he's like, yeah, he goes, you can come live with me, but you're going to have to be the one that tells your mom. And I'm like, all right, yeah, absolutely. So I go, tell my mom that I'm going to go live with my dad. And she does a whole breakdown and whatever, expected outrage from a mom that feels like she's being chosen, she's being chosen last or whatever. I don't know. Right. There's all kinds of weird shit that goes on with that. I've in my custody situation with my daughter and her mom, we've got like joint custody. We share our daughter like through the week and great communication, whatever. And that is not the case with my parents. It was like no communication at all, except for like, yeah, fuck that asshole. So,
right.
Yeah. But yeah, so I go move with, and that's the thing, like, I was basically not just moving in with my dad, I was choosing her enemy over her,
Right. Yeah, that's got to be like a blow to her, to her psyche and her ego and everything, like what? Like the guy that left us, you're going to choose him, and I've done this and this and this and whatever, but if a young man has an opportunity to be with his father, he's going to want to experience that. I mean, he's been with his mom the whole time. He's going to want to, see what else is out there.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, it was a lot of, it was a lot less to do with being with my father than just being away from my mother, and I think that was understood all around, like, or at least that's how it felt like it was understood all around. But I'll tell you what, it was I move up to Washington State, and like right around when I'm about 12ish, and once again, I've got all kinds of crazy freedom. He's got this new wife that's like at that point like 21 years old, and
good Lord, man, your dad was something, wasn't he?
Oh, I guess so. Yeah. But so he's having all kinds of fun with her. So he's all distracted. He doesn't give a fuck about raising kids. You know, enough. He did enough, but it was a different. I'll tell you what. He was a different person entirely. Like, he still had the like ridiculous structure and control and all of that, but he was happier. That's for sure. He was a lot looser. Just a cooler guy all around, because he was happier.
Yeah, he had found himself again.
To an extent, yeah, for sure. And I can see that pretty clearly. And so we actually did develop more of a relationship for sure. But I'll tell you what, 12, 13 years old, that's a hard time to try to start developing a relationship.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely, because like you were saying before, like that's the time that you kind of start pulling away, even more and more. So, kind of going the other direction, or trying to, at least, it's like totally unnatural in many senses.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And after my parents split, we pretty much just faded out of going to church at all. With my mom, I guess the church, they were favorable to my dad in the divorce and in all of that, where my mom went to the bishop, was like, hey, he's screwing around with a student. What the fuck? And they go, we'll deal with him, but you need to account for your sins. And she's like, what do you mean my sins? And I say, you obviously weren't that great of a wife. You weren't fulfilling whatever your obligations as a wife were. Otherwise, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere. And so the church authority basically pushed that onto my mom, and so she was, fuck you then. And she stopped going to church, and then we just kind of dwindled. We, the group of the kids would kind of keep each other going to church for maybe a few months after that, but it just dwindled away pretty quickly.
Right.
So,
and I've seen that a lot in the Mormon church when I was there too. A lot of situations like that, and it's like, it really kind of seems like once they get to that point where, even before couples had separated or divorced, they were all starting to kind of like go in these really crazy extreme directions, it like really kind of, like, not that you guys did, but I see a lot of them just like, kind of totally wilding out and doing stuff that like they would never have done before. And it's like, who are these people? Like, oh my gosh, like sister so-and-so and brother so-and-so, like they're all into like this crazy shit now. And they were like the, perfect, picturesque, view of like what a Mormon family was. And now they're like wild teenagers or something.
Well, and really, and that's not too far off. Like, honestly, that, because, like I said, prior to the divorce, it was, if your friends came over, you just peek your head out, because, you don't have friends in the house. Everything is secret and has to stay hidden. And there's really not a whole lot of fun going on, and not a whole lot of socialization. Now, like, flash forward maybe like 6 months into after the divorce, and my mom's house was a madhouse. Like I said, she was always at work or school, or she was always doing something. I assumed productive. It seemed like she was always working, and so we'd have parties at our house. We'd have, we had crazy shit where we'd sit around on the trampoline and play truth and dare with all the neighbor kids and all that. It's exploring being a child. It was like, for me, that's what it was about. For me, like, really, like, that's when childhood got fun. Like, it was fun being the kid wandering through the desert. I still did that. I still do that. I still am like lost in my imagination and prefer to kind of be alone in wilderness. But but it's getting to be more social, getting to have friends over, you know, and we were the wild house, like.
Right. You're where everybody wanted to be.
Yeah. We had a long street that we could look down right before my mom got remarried and we moved to her new house. We had a long street and we'd have a lookout almost all the time. If they saw my mom's van, they'd yell out, and the kids would scatter from that house like cockroaches in every direction. Just boom. So my mom didn't want all the neighborhood kids in the house eating all the food and whatever. Yep. So she'd come home and there'd just be kids scattering every direction. She said she could always see it. She'd drive up the road, and she says, for some reason, there's always kids running down the road when I'm coming home from work.
Right. What's that all about?
Yeah. But yeah. But anyway, so I moved in with my dad up in Washington State on the peninsula there. It's and completely different environment for sure. I lived in the desert my whole life, and I go up to just Pacific Northwest and beautiful forests and all of that shit. And it was the lack of religion in general population there was an interesting thing to see, where it's like not everybody goes to church. Definitely not everybody goes to the Mormon church. And for the most part, like religion is not a big factor in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my history teacher, I think I started in 7th grade there. My history teacher, as he's going through ancient world history, he says, no, we're going to touch, and this is the first day of school, he goes, we're going to touch on different religions. He goes, you know what? He goes, I'll tell you what, I'm Jewish, Muslim, I'm Buddhist, I'm whatever I need to be for the situation. But here we're going to study history. And so that means we're going to study what is recorded and what different people believed. If those aren't your beliefs, that's fine, and that's also too bad. And okay, cool, wow. So in Utah, that kind of teacher would not be allowed at all. But he did present a really, really balanced view as we're looking at ancient world civilizations, a really balanced view of like, here's what they believe. It may or may not have been true, but it's what motivated them probably more than anything else.
Right.
And that was a really cool kind of outside view. And then we meet up with these neighbor kids, just start hanging out with whatever kids are there in the neighborhood, and start riding bikes together and whatever. And then we make an Ouija board. My suggestion, we're hanging out and they're like, oh, what should we do? And I'm all like, there's this little game that I heard of. I was like hungry to start it back up, and it's like, there was that part of me that's like, well, wait a minute. Somebody could die from multiple shotgun blasts to the face, like there could be a possible consequence, but I really, really, really want to keep looking into this. And sure enough, so we make an Ouija board, make it just like, went and got the wood. My dad has always done construction, so we always had wood shops and wood sheds and wood that we needed. So we'll make an Ouija board, make the planchet, sit down with my little sister, who didn't really do a lot of the Ouija board with us for the first round. She tapped out pretty early. Mm-hmm. And then these 2 new kids, we all put our hands on it. What do you know? Figure 8 and then SA. And I'm all, are you fucking serious? And at that point, like, it actually, the reality of it, I think, struck me. Because I knew I wasn't moving the planchet. I was pretty sure my sister wasn't. Now, these 2 kids that we just met, they haven't heard the whole story. They don't know.
Right. Yeah, they have no idea, so they wouldn't have any influence on it.
Right. And so I'm going, wait a minute. So this whatever this is, has followed me across country to a new home. It's attached to me. Like,
do you think he was a spirit guide of yours or something like that, possibly, or? Something. I don't know. Like, honestly, it's. I've had different spirits insinuate that they may have been him. Ningazita's one. Azazel is another that's been like, don't you remember all the times that I used to watch you? And it's like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. But I would feel, and this is, we do the Ouija board. Actually, we didn't do it a whole lot because at that point, I was the one that was really starting to push it more and more and more. But as I did that, the sensation of where the spirit was at was so strong
the Ouija board, I didn't need it. It became like an unnecessary distraction. It's like, why would I bother with the Ouija board when I can see and feel and he's right here? And I had the it actually scared me quite a bit. Like I remember just laying in bed at night, just feeling the presence growing and just becoming more and more solid and watching me. Like that was definitely, it was absolutely watching me.
Give you like anxiety and stuff like that a little bit and that kind of thing?
I wouldn't say anxiety, but I mean, I guess anxiety. I don't know, like panic, like not to the point of panic, but like uneasiness, like a constant uneasiness.
Right. You're always having those eyes on you. It's just kind of unnerving, I guess.
Yeah, and not always was the thing. Just every now and again, like on a regular basis, but it would come and go. It wasn't constant, and so that's why I could feel it coming. I'd be like, oh shit!
Like you would feel like the atmosphere in the room would kind of change and become charged, almost that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And become charged in one particular area, usually in the corner, and usually up high.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I did start willing it to go away. Like, and this was something I go, okay, I couldn't tell my dad about this because he was too logical. Like the whole thing would just be silliness. It'd be childish silliness he wouldn't tolerate. Yep. Most of the people in the church, I understood that they weren't really spiritual people. They were, it was a social thing. I actually didn't find out until much later on that there were people that are part of the churches that are actually very, very spiritually charged, motivated people, but it's few and far between. So nobody else even really acknowledged that the only people that they acknowledged that any of this could be real were the other kids that I would get to join me in these shenanigans. And as soon as they realized it was real, they bailed. I mean, every last one of them was like, nah, fuck this, I'm out.
Right.
Now, one dude says, one of the kids that I was playing this Ouija board with, he says, he taps out. He's like, this is too much. I've been through too much crazy shit, and I don't need to open this doorway in my life. He goes, but if this is something you're interested in, go talk to this girl. And tells me the name of this girl, and she was she rode the bus. She was at the same bus stop that I would wait at, and I guess had never noticed her before. And she's kind of like gothic, like 12-year-old gothic girl. And and I'm looking at her going, how the fuck do your parents let you like just be you? And because it was unknown, like unbelievable to me that parents could be so free, whatever,
right.
Let their children just be their children. But so. I asked her something. I go, you ever played with an Ouija board or anything like that? My buddy was telling me, da, da, da. And she goes, she says, I don't do Ouija boards. She says, but there are other methods that I'll use to do spirit communication. I'm like, what? She goes, oh, yeah. She goes, I can do a pendulum. Like she had a necklace on, like a crystal necklace. She's like, check this out. And shows me a pendulum real quick. And I'm all, oh, that's cool. I go, so do you go to church then or anything? She goes, it's not like a church that you've probably ever been to. She says, it's a church with a moon, a crescent moon instead of a cross, and it's got a crescent moon in the window. And I'm like, okay, what is it? She's all, it's a church. She goes, I guess I could say it's the Church of Witchcraft. Like she kind of mixed that in there without much explanation. Bus comes. I'm like, oh, okay. That was the end of the conversation. Never saw her again.
Wow.
Like kept riding the same bus. Never saw. I don't remember ever meeting her before that. My buddy says you got to talk to her. She's at your bus stop. Boom. I see her there. Have that one conversation. That's the last I see her.
Weird.
Yeah, but that plants a seed.
No doubt.
Yeah, witchcraft is real. People can do it. There are methods. There are different methods, and people get together and they meet and they do this shit together. So it starts to kind of turn the wheels in my head. So I start looking into it. I started going to the school library, finding out whatever I can. And up in Washington State, there wasn't a whole lot. We moved. My dad being in construction, moved to Las Vegas. You know, shit's just booming there for construction at that point, like the mid '90s. So we moved down to Las Vegas, and the school libraries in Las Vegas are. I don't think they don't control too much of what comes in there. Like there are like pornographic romance novels and you know whatever. But there was the book, the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft and Demonology.
Oh, cool.
Oh man, I got my hands on this, and I'm still being like
this is mine now.
oh man, I was going. I'd go get all the change I could together so I could pay for copies. Like I'd go Xerox the pages and make copies. I'd have in my backpack so I could read it. And, oh dude, it was because there was no way I was going to check out that book, because if I checked it out, it was going to somehow get back to my dad and
oh yeah.
And he was doing the church thing, so that meant I was doing the church thing. So
right.
So I'm going to church and like excelling at it, actually, becoming like a youth leader and way active in the Boy Scouts and all of that.
Yep.
And at the same time, I'm studying witchcraft and demonology.
Who are you?
Right?
You know,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if even found you out, like what?
Oh man, and I'll tell you what, it was like I said, there are different, like, I guess, grades of like the specifically the young men. So you go through different phases as the leaps. I think every 2 years you go into like a new class group, and as I started doing this, the deacons and the teachers, and then the priests. So the three classes that you get into as a teenager, and each one that I would get, I'd move up a level, and then pretty quickly find myself like the youth leader or like the president of the class, or for the Boy Scouts I was the senior patrol leader. So I would get in and like devour it. And I'll tell you what, I started looking at, okay, so these are the things you could possibly do with witchcraft and demonology. It has all of this promise, but if that's coming from the devil, then God must have something, equal, at least equal. And so I start probing into the different advisors and leaders that I've got in the church. There was one teacher that said, and I was like 13, 14. He says, it's interesting when you do a blessing on somebody, you lay your hands on their head. He says, it's technology. It's just not technology that we know a lot about. He says, but you can feel a light and energy flush through your body and out your hands into the person you're blessing. And dude, that blew my mind. And this is just some class, and most people are asleep and whatever. My buddies are playing hacky sack in the corner.
Right.
At a lecture, and I'm going, what do you mean? What the like? And he goes, oh yeah. No, it's a real thing. You can actually do this. And he says, when you get to the point of being able to give blessings to people, you'll experience that. And I'm like, oh wow. So I bring that to my dad. I'm like, hey, here's what he says. And my dad says, that's apostasy. And I'm like, what do you mean he goes, yeah. He goes, he could get excommunicated for that. That's not church doctrine. That's nowhere in the scriptures. And so he shouldn't be teaching that. That was the last time that dude taught my class.
Whoa.
I'm pretty sure my dad went and ratted him out to the bishop or something, and he didn't teach that class again. Now, my friend Jason's mom, she got up in church, gets up because the first Sunday of every month, they have it's fast and testimony meeting, so you don't.
Yeah, I hated that shit. I'd be so hungry, man. Like, fuck, dude.
Exactly. So, and then you get up, and like most people get up and they're bear their testimony. I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Just, I know the church is true. I know that blah 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 blah. Yeah. So my friend's mom gets up, and she was a kind of a hippie sort, and she was definitely more new age than I knew at that point, for sure. But she got up and steps up the microphone in front of the congregation. She says, I know that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and that here soon, very soon, he's going to return. And when he returns, I'm going to look up into the sky and look in the clouds, and I'm going to see Jesus Christ, and I'm going to know and see with my own eyes that he is my Lord and Savior. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, oh. She says, and you know what? And all the Buddhists are going to look up and they're going to see Buddha. And all the Hindus are going to see Krishna. She says, because it's all one God. It's all one God.
Shit.
Bishop cuts off her microphone. He's got
no way.
Yeah, and the bishop has a kill switch right there. So he kills her microphone and then gets up and ushers her off stage.
Oh, my God.
She goes and sits down, and she's like, I'm watching this whole thing unfold, and I'm like, whoa, did you hear that, Dad? What's going on with that? And he's all, that's not true. That is not true, son. And I'm like, oh man, that sounds like the most true thing I have heard the entire time I've been in this church. She just said it, and she's getting cut off for it. And he goes, my dad's like, no, that is complete sacrilege. That's da 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 da. She was taken aside by the bishop after that, and basically told, if you ever do that again, then we will have to consider it apostasy, and you'll be removed from the church.
Wow.
And the only reason she kept going to church was she had a whole all these kids that that was their social group. That was their that was their thing.
So that's how we identify their whole life with, basically. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm observing these things going down, and I'm like, wow, this is the people who are telling the truth are being silenced, but they're saying important things. And so I'm gathering these little bits and pieces. And one of those is that with the Aaronic priesthood that I supposedly held as a 12-year-old boy, they lay their hands upon your head and give you the priesthood of Aaron, Moses' brother. And so it's the same power that supposedly you can part the Red Sea with. It's your ability to speak in God's behalf and to specifically call upon the ministering of angels. So I asked one of my teachers there, they were always afraid to answer, was the crazy thing. If they knew, they wouldn't want to say. But I asked, I kind of find ways to word it and say, if you were to call upon the ministering of angels, how would you go about doing that? What would be that we don't really do that. Well, yeah, but if just humor me. And so they go, okay, so you put your hand to the square, and that way you're creating a current with your body. You're also squaring yourself with reality. You're making yourself square with God. Put your hand to the square. By the power of the Aaronic priesthood, I call upon the ministering of angels, whatever. And the words are there in the Doctrine and Covenants. And it is Joseph Smith, who started the Mormon Church. He put some very, very specific Masonic and occult practices in there that do these things, and you're going to witness this and this and this. So I go out, and it was either that day or the next day after I kind of gathered that information. Okay, cool. I went and tried it. Put my hand to the square. Boom. Called on the ministering angels, and fucking nothing happens. Nothing happens. And I'm like, okay. And so I start doing the praying and negotiating with God, and going, so maybe if I start doing this more, or I'll stop doing this, and do this, maybe then you'll grant me the ability to call on your angels, because I want to see some shit. I want to have these experiences. I felt like, this had all been building up. Now I have the formula, and now here I'm going to put it to work. And fucking, I did it, and it didn't do anything. Nothing. So at that point, and I gave it some sincere, real attempts at really pushing myself into it, going, if there's something here, I'm going to milk it out of it. And when I found nothing at that point, and I was like I said, 13, 14, probably closer to 14 at that point, I just flipped a switch. That's when I shifted gears and went, okay, so I've explored this and it doesn't do anything. Now I'm going to look over to the other side and start seeing what witchcraft is for me. And I'll tell you what, that was, at that point, it was pretty much just downhill from there. So, yeah. I do have to let you go.
Oh, no problem.
But yeah.
No problem. No problem. And you know, it's you know, it's really interesting. You know how when you actually wanted to immerse yourself into that spiritual current, where like so many kids and adults too, they're just going to go with it. They're not really going to actually almost really think about some of those things like they're actually a reality. They're just kind of going with the flow, going with what they're told, and they're never going to have the opportunity to really discover if it's real or not. And you know, you took the initiative to really try to find out, and in finding out that there was nothing behind that door, you know, which really kind of caused you to go, you know, the other way. I think that's like really, really interesting. And I can't wait to jump back in, you know, on episode 3, where we're going to pick up, you know, from, would it be 15 to 22 or 23, somewhere in there. So that's, I know that's going to be super, super interesting as well. And I can't wait to dive into that with you. Yeah, no,
I'll tell you what, once again, the way that you know, you've suggested the breakdown of the different timelines is interesting, because once again, there are major shifts at this point. Just kind of sneak peek into the next episode is shit goes south with my dad pretty quickly after I make that decision, and I didn't make it out loud. I did not announce to anybody that what I was doing or what was going on. Nobody knew I was investigating the dark arts or anything. I had an experience with having a dark spirit actually come inside of me, knock me over literally, physically, in the middle of the desert, fucking knocks me to my knees. And at that point, everything else has been fucking, I guess, the left-hand path for me. And yeah, so shit falls apart with my dad, move back with my mom, and just use the freedom that I've got to really fucking start tearing into witchcraft, demonology, Satanism. Yeah, so this is where the story takes off.
That's so cool, man. I can't wait. You know, and you said that, you know, nobody knew, right? But it kind of seemed like Saw knew, you know. Yeah. He knew what was up, you know. It seemed like he was there kind of giving you that little push you needed, you know. But I can't wait to dive into it, man. I know that's going to be super, super awesome. And, you know, I appreciate your time today, and it was great as always. And looking forward to the next one, brother.
Me too. It's been fun, dude. You have a good one.
You too, man. See you, bro.
Later.